people. Thank you. Item 1 on the agenda, councillors, is apologies, and we have none. Neil. At this stage, I have no acknowledgements. I might just note we have a delegation which we'll ask to bring forward at approximately 6 p.m, if we may, please, for the meeting's concurrence. Item 2, confirmation of minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 19th of July 2022. Please, someone. Councillors Rountree and the second, sorry, I've got a mind blank. Councillor, yes, Arthur.
It's a suit. Thrown in, it's a suit.
Nothing to discuss in those minutes, councillors? Being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Adjourned business. Item 3, we have nil. Item 4, minute action list. Any questions from council members regarding the minute action list, councillors? Councillor Rountree.
10722 is regarding the waste management workshop. It says that we will do it in September. Just wondering if it would be more beneficial to do it, the new council, in November, December, then give yourself a bit more time.
Well, it's no problem from the staff's point of view, but this council want to be informed about where we're at with that.
Okay.
Well, I'm asking you.
I would have thought that it would probably be, rather than the staff do it twice, it would probably be of more benefit to the new council. But if people of this council wants to hear, I'm not worried.
Anyone else got a view? I'm taking that we're going to go on. Doesn't want to.
Okay.
Councillor Bland.
I'm happy for it to go to the new council.
We'll make 2, but no one else. Councillor Yange, you're a new council person, or?
Yeah, I'm happy for it to go to.
4, 5. This is 6. That sounds like, Councillor Rountree, you may get your wish.
Thank you.
So we'll take that we are going to defer that till very early in the new council. As early as we can in the new council, so everyone's aware of it before the budgetary process, perhaps. Any other questions from the minute action list? Councillor Bland.
Yes, thank you. 074/22 in relation to the legal costs incurred. I note that it's there for September. Just wondering how that's progressing, because I would like to see that come back before the new council.
Yeah, we're working on that. It is quite slow.
Process has become slow, councillor.
So the question is then, will it be back before the new council?
That's our aim.
That's the aim.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I just, yes.
You got to have about the minute action list, so we're on.
Regarding that 07422, why hasn't it yet? Sorry, we've got a system that you can touch a button on legal things and it'll bring out your costs. If we haven't got an accounting system that can do that, there's something wrong with this council.
How it was recorded, how it was recorded over the years, because remembering it's a 4-year event, it's probably not as pure as you think. We've also gone back to the lawyers who have provided the services over the time and tried to match their records with ours. And it's not a simple process. There are some mismatches and we have to pull apart some of it because some of it relates to, remember the actual request was that we pull it apart, not to the nth degree, but that we have some clarity around each group of legal costs. So we are still doing that. And councillor, is part of sitting along other things that have to be done as well, to be honest.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to make comment on that. I did have a notice of motion regarding that from many ratepayers that want to know this before the next election comes up. And
So we'll deal with that at the time if that's the issue.
sorry?
We'll deal with that as a notice without motion then?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Because you couldn't put it in as a split motion because you didn't know what was happening till we get the minutes. But that is because of the ratepayers that are asking this question.
Okay,
Endeavour to-
endeavour to try and hurry that along. Anyone else in relation to the minute action list? Councillor Bland?
Yes, in relation to the Meningie Lions Jubilee Park. And there's a number of those, and certainly there is a report on that. I'm just wondering when that is likely to go to community discussion following further discussion with Lions.
Through you, Mayor. We had intended to put in a grant application to supplement, as you might remember. The advice, and this really happened following the change of the state government, was that there would be no point in putting in the grant for that particular grant because their expectation is that it probably is not going to proceed. So we are now looking at how we do the work there, assuming we're not going to get any extra funding for it. So the funding envelope, I think, is as per the budget, which is around about the 100,000 mark. I'm just looking at the,
Matt, do you want to add to that?
is it,
Yeah, through the chair, I'm meeting with a consultant Friday to start discussions about the process of what their shelters may look like, which will then be part of the community consultation.
So with that figure, if I may just follow up on that, if the product isn't up to council's expectation, then, or community, then is it likely that will be a stage 1 and 2 to it?
for you?
Finish it appropriately?
For you, Matt, we're not at that stage yet. We haven't, I couldn't answer that
Okay.
without,
Oh, put on notice for later. Thank you.
Councillor Arthur?
Mr. Mayor, through you to the Director of Infrastructure and Assets, the implementation of pay to use powered sites at Alpen, it's supposed to be in next month.
Can you get hold of your mic, please?
Sorry, according to this, will be installed next month. Is it running to schedule or running behind?
Through the chair, we've ordered the parts as we've spoken about before. They're on back order. As soon as they are in our hands, they will be installed. So they'll be installed the day we pretty much get the units. The electricians been engaged, and as soon as we take delivery of the pay as you use systems, they will be installed.
Has there been any indication from the supplier will be available?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? We move on. 5.1, questions with notice. Councillor Lang, you've seen the answer there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, and thank you very much for the response from the CEO.
Okay. 5.2, questions without notice, councillors. Councillor Yench.
Thank you. Through you to infrastructure, please. The Ampol Roadhouse at Tailem, they've done a significant amount of grading and pushing material around on the road verge, which is the eastern side. It's a hell of a mess. I've had a number of complaints to me, particularly by the elderly people who go out there and do the policing of the rubbish. They pick it up. So they're very concerned. Some of them have indicated to me they'll no longer participate in that project due to the fact that it's such a mess. I acknowledge that it's potentially Crown Land Highways Department, but I think we're in there somewhere.
through you, Mayor. You're correct, it's not council's rubbish on that side of the road. Our staff do go there from time to make sure it is clean, but it is not their overall responsibility. We also, but we do that cleanup.
Thank you. And my second question also is to infrastructure. Sealed streets in Tailem, and I would presume the seal everywhere across the district, and particularly in the towns. It's starting to fail in places, and I mentioned this to your CEO. I am concerned that if we do not keep onto this, the season is going to be long and wet, which I think is facilitating a lot of this damage, but it will also be damaging our external roads as well. And I think this is something we need to be potentially focusing on, because I think the maintenance budget aspect is going to become a significant problem.
Through you, Mayor. You did bring one to my attention last night, councillor.
Yes,
If you have specific areas where you think there's some concerns, I would encourage you to please let us know so we can then prioritise that work along with all the other.
I can give you a list of the streets, yes.
So councillor, as you'd be aware, there's a asset management program around this and what I call the Google car. I think, Matt, we still use him, do we? Who gives an assessment of the condition of the streets and the curbs and I don't think in this current year there's any town streets being resealed, is there? Not resealed this year, but it does reflect, I'd like to think on a wet season eventually if we can ever get there, but yes. Well, we need a good budget in reseal all the time. Anyone else? Councillor Bland?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And this question also goes to our Director of Infrastructure. And that is in relation to the Poltallic Road. And given, again, the wetness of the season, where are we at and how far are we likely to be able to proceed in the next 6 months?
Through Mayor, Poltallic Road is in the program for this financial year. Intent is to start work on the next section, probably depending the weather. It was planning to be September, October, but it may be pushed out October, November. We are hopeful of receiving Special Local Roads Program funding, which will extend the amount of work that we can do this financial year, but that's yet to be confirmed. But there is definitely money in the budget to deliver another section of Poltallic Road. It is a 3 to 4 year project.
Okay, do we know when local road funding's likely to come out?
It's imminent.
Imminent. Excellent, thank you.
There is no more questions without notice. I'll move on. My report, councillors, is there. Any questions? Councillor Qualman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. July the 20th, meeting with the Tarlan Bend Sporting Hub with the other MPs and so forth.
Yeah, so local member Nick McBride arranged for Vincent Tarzia, who is now the shadow sports minister, on a travel through with the Tarlan Bend Football Club principally, and we went through their rooms, but in effect, a very cold morning. So part of the continual process of building cases up for state and federal funding, and it's only, so it was just a meet and greet. It wasn't really any more than that. I wouldn't take it as.
Thank you.
Councillor Rountree and then Councillor Bland.
Thank you. The 26th, the meeting with the Director of Bus SA, Regional Bus Services. That was, I think you both and the CEO attended that.
Yes. So this is the lobby group for the bus operators. We were seconded to or given the number of or name of by the ministerial office for this part of the education department that handles buses. And I suppose we had got a different view of bus policy in country South Australia from him. I'm looking at the CEO because it was more a meet and greet. We didn't have a agenda item.
So, through you, Mayor, I suppose just adding to that, councillor, the representative mentioned that the issues that this district is having with school buses is not unique to this particular area. He had mentioned that he had done some research, and it seems like they do research which they present to government as well to around. And he undertook to have a look at that research again, but also does it need updating with the changes in how people live, how farms are operated? In a sense, no firm view, but it was reassuring to know that, first of all, we weren't alone, but there was no answers from him, if that's what you're wanting to hear.
Was there any next steps through you, Mayor? Was there any next steps or
Not at this
what's their
stage.
plan?
What's
our plan?
Well, one of the facts, I suppose, his facts would be that the very low spend in South Australia by the state government on regional bus services, full stop, extremely low. I suppose he is coming from the busing industry association's point of view. Second thing is, I think we're probably the only state, once again, according to him, where the education department actually runs the school buses, which can lead to them not being available for other purposes. And I think that was what my recollection. So there's sort of some policy issues. The school bus policy was only reviewed about 3 years ago and no particular changes were put in place. Probably for a broadacre councils like ours, the less than 10 people on the bus can be withdrawn is probably a problem for us.
Sounds like a good, through you, Mayor, sounds like a good start.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Getting that one overturned at least.
Well, get that addressed, and I would suggest that we have sent all the letters to all the state ministers, and we've met one or two of them in the last few weeks as well. That at some stage we'll probably need to meet with the Education Department Minister, his department, but we did meet with one of his senior officers a few weeks before.
So you, Mayor, I suppose the only other thing was that maybe there may be a place for the MOLGA to come together so that if there are common issues around from a council perspective, sometimes there's a better outcome if there's a few councils involved. So that may be the next step as well as a collective.
Through you, Mayor, the other issue would be to let the kindy kids on and have them counted. I think that, two really easy ones that would help matters.
That's right, but at the moment the departmental officers stick to the policy. Now this is coming to more focus, as you'd be aware, in this year because Canalpin Primary School in our area is effectively closed, but Geranium Primary School, I understand, is now closing as well. So we've got a long way between drinks.
Yep.
In all of our interior area
Thank you.
for buses. So yeah. Councillor Bland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was one. And the other one is in relation to the streetscape consultations that were done. I unfortunately couldn't attend, but if you could just give us an overview as to where, what sort of issues, if anything, that we need to immediately address.
I think that particularly at Tintinara, very well attended. I'm actually pretty impressed with our consultants, to be quite honest. I think they had a way of drawing out of people what they perhaps weren't going to say. The area, I suppose we defined for the streetscapes is relatively tight because we don't want it, but no, taking note of anything outside of that area we need to address. I think we wait some plans from the consultants to come back to perhaps even elected members might get a say eventually. Well, Matt, just if you can, just give us a little brief update right now.
Yeah, through the chair, the consultation sessions were excellent, well attended, and the information that we received was valuable, really good. Tintinara, lots of people, Canalpin, few people, but they brought in a lot of information from others, as well as Tailem Bend. Plus, we got a lot of information over the internet through online surveys, as well as hard copy information provided to us. So on Friday, I'm going down to Adelaide. We're going to start collating all that information. It's going to be a process, but there's going to be a whole lot of information and a whole lot of ideas that we'll put forward to both the elected members and the community to see if the consultation piece hit the mark, and then start to work out what the priorities are in developing the master plans. It's probably going to be a 2 or 3 month process, but eventually we'll have a set of plans that the community are aware of, and there'll be small projects that we can start to pick off and start to deliver throughout the year. There'll be some bigger ones that we'll seek funding for, but from a consultation point of view, it was a really valuable process to be involved with. It was excellent, to be honest.
Great, thank you.
And I might
Yeah.
just add to that, in the last week we met with the teams meeting with the Director of Transport, John Whelan, and one of his officers around the other study, which is the Swamport Bridge to Mallee study. And the department's having, while we thought they probably weren't in a rush, they're actually having a pretty deep look at the highway, but particularly the Swamport Bridge or a second bridge access issue and what options there are in that general area.
Okay.
So they're all moving at a pace now.
Thank you.
Councillor Hill.
I think we've just about hit every other one. Did you enjoy your afternoon or day at the Super Sprint? And have you been able to have any recent conversations with Dr. Sheehan about the reinstatement of, how it's going to affect the Bend with the reinstatement of the supercar race in Adelaide?
It was cold. But it was very cold. As you know, councillor, I'm not a great motorsport fan. Nonetheless, it was lovely. No, we haven't. It'll be prudent for us too soon. Again, it was cold. Any other questions? My report, please. Okay, councillors, thank you. Council members' reports, I believe there is none to this month. We'll deal with that. Thank you for that. Notices of motion number 7. Without motions without notice, councillor Arthur, you indicated earlier
That one.
in relation to a minute action list issue. So we're just going to pick out the minute, please. April of this year, that a report be presented to council on all legal costs incurred in the current 2018 to 22 council term, summarised under major headings. As was said earlier, that's coming the issue. I'm waiting for the motion to come up on the screen.
I'll just read out if you like, Mr Mayor.
Yes.
This is regards motion 07422, and after not request being told by the ratepayers to bring this up and ask for this information. The motion reads: the legal costs incurred by elected members and staff be compiled with the following details in the report due. Who made the complaint? Complaint made against who? Details of the complaint. Details of the independent conclusion regarding the complaint. The cost of the investigation which is to include an estimated dollar figure on staff time as well as the legal costs.
I have a question.
In a second. Let me. What I'm considering is that not duplicating the minute in act that's in place. My second problem, councillor, is
Confidentiality.
I don't know whether some of those points can be made public at all.
That's,
There's certain other processes that are running, have run, I should say, make that very difficult.
Mr.
Councillor Bland.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that was my concern as well, that we would have some level of confidentiality on some of those complaints, and given that I was the writer of the original motion, I have no issue with the major headings as long as confidentiality is met where it is legally required to be done.
Can I just ask this question of the CEO? Most of the complaints that have been dealt by have been taken out of confidence.
Yes.
So there's no problems with confidentiality. And it's just a matter of the ratepayers wanting to know what they are paying for and what the complaints are and what is adjudication.
So councillor, you're referring more to code of conduct.
I'm
Complaints
referring
that
to
are
any complaint that has been made by an elected member or against a staff member. There may not be any complaints against a staff member. I can't remember it coming up, but I was asked to include that in the motion.
I think that parts of what you're asking for will be covered under the headings part summarised under major headings.
Part of would be, yes.
Parts will be.
to you, Mayor, if there are any involving staff that won't come to the council in the public domain, if it's in the public domain already, then all of the, basically they're completed ones, and people are aware of them. So part of the costs associated with them relate to Councillor Bland's motion from some time ago. If it's not completed or there are outstanding issues, it won't be in the report anyway. So anything that I would report is already in the public domain, so I'm not sure what you're asking, councillor.
Well, the biggest problem, with all due respect to the CEO, and we've got a typical example today of an in confidence motion. And if that was coming out of confidence, no one would know, because there's no details. And most of the things that we've brought out of confidence, the details there. And that has been something that has been lacking in this council for about 8 years. Every time we do a review in September, we do not have the whole gist of what happened. Now, I can't see where there's a problem. They're not in confidentiality.
Councillor, what I'm going to do is ask you that if you want to continue with your motion, you need to raise it as a motion on notice, not without notice. I think a group of what you are asking for will come out under the previous minute, quite honest. So I'm not going to allow the motion.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Motions without notice, councillors?
Right there. That's it.
There being none? I move on to Office of the Chief Executive Officer's report. Councillors, number 1, 22-23 community grants, round 1 of that, of our usual 2. Councillors, no. I'm looking down, looking at the list at the moment. I'm going to go in the room and ask councillors, each one individually, whether they have any of those groups. There's a fair few groups there, whether they want to declare a conflict of interest, and if so, what level, material, perceived or actual, and if it's in the second 2 categories, what action they will take. Then we will be able to put forward the ones where councillors feel they don't have to leave the room. I can't see another way of handling it. Anyone else got any better ideas? So I'll start, and you're under no compunction to declare if you don't want to, of course, but you know, you'd be prudent too. Councillor Hill, you got any you think you need to declare?
I sit on the Coorong Conversations Matter Committee, so I expect that I have an interest there.
So you would be which level of perceived? How do you want to handle that?
I'm happy to leave the room when the vote is handled.
Okay, it's up to you. That's all you think? Councillor Ling?
I have nothing to declare.
Right. Councillor Yench?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I have one, and it is the Taylor Bend Historians Association. Whilst I am not a legitimate member, I have participated significantly and provided them with material. And if they are doing a history, therefore, my family's involved in that history aspect. So therefore, it's an actual, and I will leave.
Any others?
No.
Councillor Roundtree?
No, nothing. I have not involved with any of those groups.
And that's the ones in the recommendation. I trust everyone understands this.
Yes.
Yeah. At this stage. Councillor Arthur?
Right up with none of them.
None of them. Councillor Bland?
Neil?
No. Councillor Bowman?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have 3, the Taylor Bend Progress Association material. Like Councillor Yench, I've got an attachment to the Taylor Bend Historians Association, and I'm a member of the RSL Taylor Bend, so I'll be leaving the room.
You will leave in each of those 3, and you are material in each 3, you believe?
Not
Councillor,
yet, councillor Crom.
You're a bit early.
not yet.
You just want a coffee.
Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Matt. So I have a perceived conflict of interest for the RSL Taylor Bend. I will remain in the room and not vote. Can I ask a question? So the Progress Association, I am the council rep.
So we've had this discussion. If it's a council rep and you're not participating in the discussion, then I would just say perceived, because you have a connection there. You don't stand to gain from it. But if you participate in the voting in the Progress Association and you're a real member, then I would say that it may be material in this case because a grant's been given.
I'm not a member.
Okay.
And this particular item came up at the Christmas parade, apparently. So it didn't come before the Progress Association.
So I would say perceived because of the connection, but nothing more.
Okay, then I'll declare a conflict of interest perceived, remain in the room and not vote.
So councillors, now we're going to group them. For the ones where there's absolutely no conflict of interest for any of you, we'll put that in the first motion. And then as we go through the ones where you have a conflict, we'll ask you to leave the room or you stay in the room and not vote, whichever you've advised you'll do. So there'll be a couple then, there'll probably be 3 or 4 motions to cover them all off.
Except
Oh, sorry, man.
me.
Sorry, man.
So I will declare in relation to the, which ones were they? Sorry, I've got to go back through this. The RSL at Tailem Bend, I may be a member if they accept me. So, so it's perceived, but
You're not a member yet?
I'm not, well, they may not accept me. So I think I will remain in the room. And I can't see why I think I can vote. The SACWA Kermaduk branch, I think some of this is in relation to money for the hall, of which I am a member at Kermaduk. So I think it's perceived and I'll remain in the room but not vote. Sorry, actually, just making it complicated. Yep, thank you. That's mine. Okay, tell me which order you wish to go through them, please. Categorise them A, B, C, D or something, please.
Nobody.
Then we've got 5 that've got no
St.
councillors.
Luke's.
So can I read out what I think they are, please? Tintinara Bowling Club, the Menengi Sailing Club, St. Luke's Anglican Guild, Tintinara Lions International, and the Friends of the Tintinara CWA building. My recollection, Councillor Watt,
I was just going to move it.
you're going to move that the groups of in A, I'm going to call them A just to keep my mind clear, be awarded funding under round 1 of council grants program.
Correct.
Mr Mayor, had my hand up for a while to ask a question
Yeah,
prior to this. I have some concerns, and it has been brought to my attention that unfortunately wasn't at the workshop and was there any discussion around why we're awarding more than 2/3 worth of the grant funding in round 1 instead of dividing it near equally, which has been done in the past? It's a change of process and action by this council coming into an election. I find that a little bit surprising, given that some people do tend to, some clubs or groups do tend to do things in the second half of the year. Unless we're going to provide more money to this in the second half of the year, was that even discussed that this may be seen to be a little bit unfair?
Mr Mayor, can I answer that? Yes, it
no,
was.
no, because I wasn't at the meeting either. CEO might answer this one.
Through you, Mayor, my recollection of previous rounds were that they weren't divided equally. I think the first one when I started in council in the 21 year. We had a similar, that it was skewed to the first half of the year and very little left for the second half of the year. At the briefing, there was no discussion about it. It was really about whether the people were entitled, the groups were entitled or not. And the rest really is up to council to decide.
So the second part of my question, I accept that sometimes this does get skewed a little bit, but we are going into a new council. And the second part of my question is that, and I may have misread some of it, trying to look at the detail, is that not everybody actually met the full criteria of matching grants. Am I correct in that?
There was one.
Who was there?
So there's one that's partially successful, councillor, in page 11 of the agenda, my agenda anyway.
And through you, Mayor, they're not included in that list, councillor.
I thought there was another one.
You got the report in front of you, the agenda?
That's all right.
Three altogether.
There's two unsuccessful applicants.
I'm aware of the two unsuccessful and they make good sense.
I might just add at this point that in relation to the proactive parents at Tintinara, I've received a letter and I'll be endeavouring to have a meeting with that group as soon as we can arrange one. It's probably felt that what their project they were applying for is perhaps more council's land anyway. We need to meet with them.
That's through you, Mayor. They were unsuccessful because they're not an incorporated body.
So that's the real, but nonetheless, we'll look at what they're about. So councillor, I suppose there mightn't be enough or that amount of money in addition in round two. As you can spend it once, you could argue. I wasn't part of that conversation, to be quite honest. Workshop.
It wasn't.
Actually,
I'll go to councillor. Sorry. Yes, Taylor.
Through you, Mayor. So I'm a bit disappointed actually that there's a suggestion here that in some way the applicants have been chosen because it's an election year. This application, the applications came to staff followed the policy, the staff brought this to a discussion, and at no point did anyone suggest anything about an election or an election having anything really to do with the selection. So the staff put this list up. The question was asked at the briefing whether or not the policy was followed. The question was also asked about the policy, would the policy be updated for future rounds? And therefore the staff, as far as I'm concerned, this is the staff's recommendation.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can respond. There was no intent to indicate whether or not this council or staff have done anything wrong. The question was around in relation to the next council having fair opportunity to look into the grant system and work. It had nothing to do with whether I believe this council has done anything wrong.
The councillor, at this stage, we're considering 31,600 of 52,000.
Thank you. Yes, I'm aware.
Councillor Roundtree.
thank you, Mayor. At the meeting, at the workshop, when we did look at this, I actually did raise the question that Councillor Bland said, are we giving too much in this first one? And we did discuss it. And I think it was decided that these are all worthwhile projects, and rather than make those who got in now wait, we would award these ones, and with what's left, we'll do the second round. But the discussion did happen, and we did exactly what Councillor Band is raising, did get discussed, and decision was made to, go with the ones that we had. So we did cover off on it.
Right.
Thank you.
Councillor Arthur before Councillor
I'll
Yance.
second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
You're very kind. Thank you for that. Councillor Yance, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I was at the discussion, and it was brought up about the fact that it was a significant amount of money. One of the things that was brought up, and I would believe Councillor Arthur would recall, was that in previous times we would give a portion of what was required, but we found that some cases, the organisations receiving the grants were unable to fulfil their obligations, and therefore the grant would lapse because they didn't have the resources to do a part. So that was discussed, I believe, at that time. I would also suggest, Mr. Mayor, an inclusion on your list, the Coorong Conversation Matters. I didn't believe anybody raised a concern with that group.
Yeah, Tracy.
Oh, Tracy did, sorry, my apologies. Must have been asleep. Thank you.
Can't help you if you're doing that, councillor. I've got a motion now from move councillor Roundtree, second to councillor Arthur, that the five on the screen here, there you go, Tintinara Bowling Club, Menengi Sailing Club, that Anglicans, St. Luke's Anglican Guild, Tintinara Lions International, and the Friends of the Tintinara CWA building be awarded funding under the round one of the council. So there wish to be some debate around that, councillors? Councillor Roundtree, you wish to close?
Closed.
Thank you. So I will put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Which one are we going to pick next, Ashley? How about we just do with the Coorong Conversations Matter one, so that Councillor Hill, I think, is the only person that needs to declare at this stage. We could please. Does someone wish to move the same?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Yench. Second to Councillor Bland, I'll take. Is there any discussion around that $1,000? Councillor Bland is the seconder. You're closing, councillor.
Closed.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Let me say unanimously still, because a lot of people here. You bring Councillor Hill back in. Fine. Let's try that. Who's got to lead with the Tailem Progress Association? Councillor Taylor, you were going to remain but not vote.
Yes.
My list shows only you two in that one. The council, so we'll move to that one. If someone wished to move that the Tailem Bend Progress Association. Come on, Councillor Roundtree moves to be funded. Councillor Arthur is the seconder. Is there any discussion? Closing, councillor.
Closed.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Next one I think we'll take is the Tailem Bend Historians.
Thank you, Mr.
Councillor
Mayor.
Yench, you're leaving on this one. Someone prepared to move that way? Councillor Hill and Councillor Ling will be the mover and seconder. Any discussion around the Tailem Bend Historians receiving funding? Being none, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. The fifth one we will take will be the RSL Tailem Bend for $5,000. Myself and Councillor Taylor are not voting. Received.
Are you not voting?
No, I'm not voting.
But you were voting.
I wrote not vote here, big words. They might reject me as a member, you never know. Councillor Qualman is still out of the room. Councillor Yentz, you're back. Nice.
Hang on, Mayor.
No,
Hang on, Mayor.
yeah, I know. I've got my wrong notes. I've said I'll remain and vote.
Yes.
Someone wishes to move in relation to Tail and Bend. We RSL, aren't we? Is that what we're up to?
Move that way, Mr Mayor.
Councillors Arthur and Roundtree is the seconder. Is there any discussion around the Tail and Bend RSL? I am received but voting because I'm not a member yet. Councillor Taylor is not voting. Or no discussion?
Finished.
I put the motion. All those in favour? Supposed to do? Yeah, I am this one. You voting for it, Councillor Arthur, or those against? That is carried unanimously. I believe the only one left, councillors, is the Kemadoo branch of the South Australian Country Women's Association, of which I think I'm the only one that is remaining, but I will not vote on this one. Councillor Taylor, you moving that way? Councillor Qualman, now you're back. You're a seconder?
Yep.
Any debate? Being none, put the motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Gallery, if that seemed tortuous, but we have advice that we need to do that more strictly. I think we've dealt with everything that was in the first conversation. Councillor, anything else on that agenda item you want to discuss? Being none. Council policies 9.1, fee waiver community groups policy. There is a recommendation there, councillors. Someone want to move that way? Councillors Lang and Bland. Councillor Lang, you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you.
The Bland?
No, it's very explanatory. Thank you.
Councillor Roundtree, you are speaking.
I have a question.
Question?
Is there a bond charge to cover for council damages on these fee waived? So say a hall is used, is there a bond charged?
Through you, Mayor. The bond charge still is in place. It's
Yep.
the waiver of the actual fees.
It's okay, thank you.
Councillor Arthur?
Just regarding this, in a previous life, we had a motion on the table to look at all community halls and how the council can look after them. That has never been done. And it might be nice for, Titanara Hall, the community groups to use it for other, but what about Peak Hall where they pay for it themselves? Now, one of the things was going to be looking into helping them maybe with some sort of financial assistance for all those privately owned. And when I say privately, I mean community owned halls, no different than community Tail and Bend or Titanara or Canalpin. Now that was going to be looked at and it still hasn't been done. And yet we've come up with this process which leaves them completely out of it. And I
So
just asked the CEO
Yeah.
why.
I think some time ago we had a discussion around this, councillor. I don't know if there was a motion or a minute to support it though. But there's been a discussion around what further assistance we may offer our smaller community halls that aren't owned by council. I'll take that on board though, I think. Any other discussion, debate, questions? Okay. Councillor Ling, you're closed.
Close.
Put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Number 10 is the minutes of the Coorong Infrastructure and Assets Committee minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of August at Canalpin from memory. Councillor Routry, you were there.
I was there and just have some questions, concerns, queries that I would want to raise.
You want to move the recommendation?
Well, not
before-
yet.
Not
Well,
yet.
not
We'll
just,
try me
yeah.
with the questions.
So I've raised this before. It's a bit of a perplexing conundrum that when the minutes of a meeting are presented to council and noted or accepted, before they've gone back to the original committee for ratification, if there's a problem or if there's something that we don't agree with in the minutes, it's already been accepted into council. How do we then ratify? How do we then deal with the changes we want to make to the section 41 committee minutes? Because we now wait till the next INA committee meeting to raise it. And in which case, does it then come back again to this committee? What happens? That's my first thing. And
through the mayor, so the council's just receiving these minutes. They're not adopting them as such. So there is opportunity for those minutes to go back to the Infrastructure and Assets Committee for revision at the next meeting.
so through Mayor, do those minutes then come back to be received by council in their amended form?
I would say not.
Because that's the part through you, Mayor, that worries me, that if you go back and look at the agenda and the agenda's got these minutes in it, unless you then perhaps go find the INA minutes, they
I'm
could be
quite
two.
sure why, if you had an issue with the minutes, you wouldn't bring it up right now.
Well, this is what I'm asking. Is that the procedure? Because I do have an
Well-
sso with the minutes.
Well, if you have, the best thing always is to discuss that with the CEO as soon as you notice it.
I only noticed it today when I read the agenda. I was very, very busy.
Your issues with it are,
Well, I noticed at the meeting that mostly what we did was just receive and note the reports of the recommendations presented to the INA committee. Most of what we did was just receive and note, knowing that a lot of the discussion that ensued, we knew that we'd be having with the full council. So in 1822, which is on page 2 of the minutes, a little bit ambiguous on number 2C, 200,000 from the 22-23 plant and fleet renewal budget allocation. So we're going to be deferring that to 23-24. It doesn't really say what it's for. Now, in the information document, you can get more detail, but you've got to go to the information document to find it. I just think it's a little bit ambiguous, and I wasn't entirely sure if did we just say that? Because that's not how I recalled our conversation going.
so all councillors, the members of the public can see all agendas of all our committees, finance and.
Yes, I understand that.
So like any reading of anything, you need to have the two of them alongside each other realistically to make sense. The minutes is a recording of the decision,
Sure.
not a commentary on the decision.
But I don't believe
report.
it's actually an accurate recording of what we discussed at the day at the INA committee meeting.
What do you think's missing?
More of the detail. I think we were going to it's probably just more of the detail. I haven't written down exactly what I think it is. But I just read it today and thought, no, that didn't to me seem
Just
like.
followed up with, and as is our practice now with a report to full council. So
Yeah.
committees work the things up to report to full council to debate.
Well, I'd be interested to see what the other members that were there felt if those minutes actually accurately reflect what we talked about.
Well, I'm sorry, councillor, I'm going to say I think they do, but
Okay, well, you were there, so.
I was
that's fair
there.
enough.
So yeah, any other councillor got any reflection on that minutes at all? Councillor Coleman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually concur with councillor Rountree, and even though, as you'll see, I was a little bit late, and I myself feel that maybe these minutes could be a little bit more comprehensive. I know it's more work, but they're an important document. And I did actually obtain more information by relevant other documents in the agenda to put it all together. Community can read it as that too. So that's my concern. I just think sometimes could have a little bit more oomph in it.
No, and it's clarified in the report, particularly in relation to that item further in the
Information.
in the document here further today for our agenda. So
Good. Mr. Mayor, I'll just make a comment. We've got to realise this is only a recommending committee. We don't make any decision as far as councils go. One of the decisions has probably been brought up there. after thinking about it and going through a few things, I don't agree with what we have now presented to the council. But that is up and to another motion. And the thing was, with these, we've been told that these then become items in the general minutes of the council to be accepted or declined.
Yeah, I take that on board, councillor. Sorry, councillor Bland.
I have just a question, given I wasn't at the meeting, but there's been significant discussion. I'm a little bit confused on the last sentence in the minute action list about further works for sand removal would be deemed dredging and would trigger a separate approval process. Has that actually been done, given it was in the action list, or is that still to be done?
So councillor, I think we may have commented on the very long, as in many other authorities, I don't know how many, there's a lot
Yes,
in
there
the
are.
agenda around the dredging of, or the not dredging, whatever we needed to do at the Sailing Club landing at Menangi. I think probably we don't need to read any more into that. I think we're at the point where everything's been approved, Director. I understand. The point we were trying to make in the committee was that some what appear simple projects are extremely complicated.
I'm aware of that in relation to the lake always. And I guess my question is in relation to the last sentence, Mr. Mayor, and that is further works for sand removal would be deemed dredging and would trigger a separate approval process. Has that been done and completed as well?
Through you, Mayor, if we were to disturb the floor of the lake, it would be considered dredging and it would be a completely different process to removal of reeds. That's what that sentence means. So if we were going to remove the floor of the lake, it would
Yep.
require a completely different process with far more
Complex.
regulation.
I understand the issues around the lake floor. So the other part of that was sand, replacement of sand there at one stage as well. Has that been done?
We'll take that on notice and have a look.
Thank you.
What the extent of the work was.
Still haven't got a mover and a secondary. Councillor Ling, thank you.
I'm a little bit confused, Mr. Mayor, as to whether if I've heard members of the committee saying they believe the minutes are maybe incorrect.
No, they're saying they're incorrect. They say that they might want more information in,
Okay.
which is an ongoing challenge. And just keep in mind, this committee does go out, so it doesn't have perhaps the full electronic support that other committees have or this chamber has.
Okay.
And I think we did have trouble with something that day.
I'll second.
You second it, councillor Bland. Thank you. Received the minutes of the Infrastructure and Assets Committee held on the 2nd of August. Any further discussion? Is that just receiving the minutes?
Close.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. With the leave of the meeting, I've got leave to bring forward the deputation I've agreed to today. Anyone saying no? Welcome forward. Yeah, we're gonna have a speaker, Ash, or we're gonna do this. They've got loud voices. They've got loud voices. I know Kate Faith has. So this is a deputation. We will find a microphone. Where's Mitchell? Something in the room. We'll just wait for the microphone. So councillors, deputation from the Coorong Environmental Trust. Faith, Rosie, aren't you coming up now? You out on it. Faith Coleman. We give you 10 minutes, Faith.
Have a PowerPoint for me.
I'll leave it. Very, very organised. And then councillors, you can ask some questions afterwards. What it's about.
We just need 2 minutes, ma'am.
Next 2 minutes.
Waiting for the-
All right.
Just the top one, yeah, that one there. Okay, so I guess this isn't a surprise for many of you. Most of you have heard stuff about the environment before. Unfortunately, years have not been able to talk to you, so I thought it probably an appropriate time, and Ken was hoping to join me today, but he can't, but to come and talk to you on National Science Week about where we're at with this. I would like to acknowledge that it always was and always will be Ngarrindjeri Ruwi. If we can move to the next slide. And I know that there's a few questions that have come up about what the Coorong Environmental does. Here, you'll all be provided with this separate discussing the matters of concern to the Coorong District Council that the Coorong Environmental Trust may be able to assist you with. Things like values to primary production, fisheries and irrigation. Out of 10 of its productivity value that it was in the 1960s. Get 10% of that back would be lovely. Aesthetics, rebranding and ecotourism. So I don't know if you've noticed, but it's getting that to stop stinking and get back with water and fisheries. Major aesthetic. Restoring the area to the Coorong would be a huge bonus that the council and the local ecotourism rely on that branding so heavily. Along the South Lagoon in particular, but also near things that have come up in the past and currently in the South Lagoon, it's about exposure to hydrogen sulfide gases to the local landholders. People are waking up in the middle of the night, gasping from the smell. And of course, in the lakes, I suspect everyone remembers concerns during the Millennium Drought. The need for clear information and direction. The lakes and Coorong area is plagued with politics. All of you know that way too well. And the lack of clear direction is something that's preventing local action in the area. We'd love to do something, we just don't know what we can do. Education and employment opportunities for residents. The Alan Noble on board to come and work with the local schools and set up monitoring devices in Coorong. So that's sort of really proactive, bringing opportunities from town. We're talking about bringing the chief engineer from Google out the Coorong district. These things are major advantages. And of course, it's a long challenge is getting funding in the Coorong LAP when major government funding programs fall over. And so it's those gaps that the Lakes and Coorong Environmental Trust would like to work with the council to try and secure. The Coorong District Council's involvement to date has been attendance and presentation at meetings and politicians' visits. That's been ongoing now for 6 or 7 years. Many of the people around the table have participated in those processes, and also letters and minutes of support and submission to parliamentary committees. What I really want to talk to you today about is the things that you can be involved with moving forward. And I know our executive officer sent Mayor and CEO a letter about potential membership. A lot of other ways you can be involved. Membership is free and it allows you to vote about what the trust does. I mean, it's a bit of a no-brainer, really. But it's also things around the LAP partnering with the trust. We've got the Goodwood to Wellington LAP on board. We can only ideally work with members of the trust, which at the moment, given the Coorong LAP is part of the council, that makes it challenging for us to work with them preferentially over the Goodwood to Wellington LAP. So having you guys on board as members would help, and being able to work in those partnerships would help. It would be great if the council could demonstrate support for the trust to state and federal governments. It's really hard to get everybody on board on something, and demonstrating that in a has to include the council. And of course, hosting trust events with professors from Interstate and Adelaide who are keen next month to come and give a presentation, a workshop in the area. And it'd be great to work with the council. Go to the next one. Comments, you can read them separately. Reports about environmental issues. Basically, they come down to this. When you read them, plenty of data out there. We haven't put it all together, and we are arguing with each other and not working. Trust aims to address those. We aim to have Indigenous and local community voices included with academic ones, and we would really like to show the rest of the basin how it's done. Okay. Next one. To put it language, what we're after. The History Museum for the Coorong, a place where all the information is to the Coorong. So when you say, is this across the well, no, it's not really. We had this 6 years ago. Or, you know, what is it in the previous flow? What influence was the Southeast Australian? Answer those. And I think it's important that we are able to answer those. At the moment, most of us don't know who to go to. Next. And it's important to recognise our community has amazing traditional owners who have a huge amount of information. We have world-leading experts in the field for generations. Having a clear voice for the estuary, for the wetland is important, and I believe that we can fix what's gone wrong down there, or at least make it an awful lot healthier if we work together. Next slide, please. These are a list of the trust functions. Most of you have seen them before, so we'll move right along. And this is, of course, the list of things we don't do, which is as important as you would recognise as councillors. What we don't write policy, we don't participate in political lobbying, as the trust, obviously, our members do. We don't manage the barrages. Who would want to do that? We don't manage or implement things like your lap. We would with. We don't undertake on-ground work. We may provide financial support to others to do this. And we don't deal with non-environmental matters. Discussions of skate parks we're not involved with. So moving on. So once again, at least half of you have seen that before. I think it's for me to have it here so you can look at it later if you want to see where the council would fit within it. Moving on. This is some of the things we've done 2 years while locked down with COVID. Talking to you guys. It's actually more than we've been working with the local fishermen, and Tracy can attest to this, identifying things like the Sea Sparkle Lagoon in the Coorong. Many of the local residents had never seen it, where the water glows in the dark. It's something that's only really happened since the 80s and the level it is at the moment. We've done things like identifying dinoflagellate blooms that have an impact on fisheries productivity, which hadn't been identified by programs in the past, and we've had those identified by world-leading experts in Tasmania and Germany. I've been running a program with the South Lagoon guys about detecting the hydrogen sulfide in the air down there to see if it is at a level that's of human health concern. We have reconstructed, using funding from the fisheries and from the universities, we have reconstructed what the South Lagoon looked like and how productive it was. And it was a completely different place to where it is now. You can see that examples of what was in it on that picture on the furthest end. And we have 43,000 records of biota that were available. It is more than double what the official government records of the Coorong are. That's what we've done in the last few years. I'm pretty pleased. Next. We also have an active social presence. This week alone, we got 115 more subscribers. The fascinating thing is we're reaching communities that are mainly wealthy and mainly have money to burn. Who else do we want to engage with? You know, and so there's some really interesting things about the group that an organisation focused on science and not politics can reach. And so as the council's concerned, who we can engage with versus who you can, for a Facebook page that's only being actively managed for a month is really quite remote. Next, please. And of course, we are supported by legislation, although the fine parts of that to be determined, because our environmental minister, although you can see she's quite supportive, is slightly snowed under. So at the moment, we're working out the fine parts of that, but we've got that legislation in place, and we put 5 years of effort into getting that legislation in place so that we can ensure we live forever, even if I don't. And this is for you to look at later, how that will work and how that. Important thing to note at the moment is while legislation is being operated by the minister, we'll have private trust. The private trust is the organisation that the legislation supported one will be. It's just that we don't have that extra support right now. We don't have a South Australian government rep on it. But that is, we continue to function until that government gets sorted. Next. And I think
Minutes. Beautiful. Questions, councillors? Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much. Regarding your Natural History Museum,
yes,
are you thinking that is physical or virtual?
at present,
Is your ultimate aim to have it physical?
most of the organisations I've worked with who have done something like this, because there's about a dozen different histories and personal rooms with them. That's what they do with the history and so forth, have ended up with some which often has natural history things, but I think in the funding requirements. We've also got people like museums and stuff who are keen to engage with us.
So are you ultimately, the funding was huge and some of the funding was available. Would you be, is it the kind of building, if you like, which is attractive to tourism and would draw people in? You just stated there that majority of people visiting the page are from Adelaide, therefore.
Yes, so our fundamental aim is the science aspect of Natural History Museum. Natural history museums generally are only open to the public as an additional thing. Most of the natural history museums in the world, that's a very small portion. There is an organisation, Lakes Hub, that was trying to do that work, and there are other organisations, local museums area, that do that sort of work that are trying to get more support them with the outcomes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Roundtree?
Just a quick one. How long has the trust been going for?
Depends on how we call going for. As a group of people who've been working together, we've been working on this 6 years.
6 years.
As far as
Can you use the mic? Otherwise people on YouTube can't. hear.
sorry, all right. So as far as a group of people who work together, it's been roughly 6 years. As far as the administration, as far as an association goes, about 2.
Thank you.
Yeah, councillor Hill.
Full disclosure, Coorong Wild Seafood helps fund Faith's PhD. She's currently studying. But you've done some remarkable work covering this keystone species in the Southern Lagoon. Could you talk a bit about that?
Okay, so there was a picture, some slides back in the South Lagoon. We've discovered this lagoon is a gentleman called Wamsley, who used to be the chief botanist, spent an awful lot of time looking at an awful lot of guts from ducks and swans and things, because what else would a botanist do? And what he worked out is the main food source in the Coorong was not rupia. The main food source was something called stonewort, which is Lake Indawara. And what we discovered is that stonewort kept all of that embryo, that smelly sediment down. It formed like a carpet over the top. We literally swept our sins underneath a carpet of vegetation, and that kept the water clear. And it also kept the water highly productive for fish. And that particular species of vegetation preferences fish above any other form of main species above it. It was an engineering species, but it required carbonate flows, which come from Salt Creek and groundwater.
Other questions? Faith, you've done very well.
Thank you.
Councillors, I think perhaps the CEO will give some information to whether probably a report around this some age, I think. The initial discussions that would come out of this deputation. Thank you, Faith. And Councillor 11-1. (122) Annual Business Plan, fourth quarter review. There's a recommendation that council adopts the annual business plan, fourth quarter review. Is someone, councillor Roundtree, you're moving that way? You're asking a question?
I would like to ask a question.
Yeah.
Thank you. I noticed that, and I'll find the page for you. 23. That we talk about revise and refresh the Coorong brand. I think I've raised this once before. what was the business case for revising and refreshing the brand? What does it entail? How much is it going to cost? Is it new logos? Is it new sign on the front? You know, like I just don't know anything about it. And I'm a big disliker of rebranding when we change governments and then they call the department something else and they spend thousands of dollars on new business cards. What is this all about and why are we doing it?
You may. So not, in a sense, that's not the intent of this. This is more an intent to have a look across the district so that, and say the park at Meningie, we have a set of structures that fit and look and feel a bit the same across the whole district. So when people look at a asset of council, they know that it belongs to council. What we're doing, and there's been no specific work done here yet, but what we're doing with the streetscape is asking them to provide some look and feel. The Coorong brand is not changing.
So are we
This
going to
is-
work with the streetscape?
Yes, it's work with the streetscape people are going to put together when they look at the streetscapes across the three towns. What is it that makes them look and feel a bit the same as well? So when they provide the master plans, as Matt said, they will bring all the information from the community into those plans. But the intent also is that they will try and make that look and feel the same. And that's not to say they will be duplications of each other. It's more about, will the colours be the same? If there's any infrastructure, is there a look and feel that's the same about them? Rather than if somebody drives through the Coorong District Council, it's hard to get a sense of continuity from top to bottom because each time a new asset is planned, we have to go through that whole process. It's not unusual for councils to have a suite of colours and we've got that. So it's not like reinventing the wheel. It's more about bringing some consistency.
So through you, Mayor, then this revise and refresh the Coorong brand is part of the streetscape. So it's not needing any extra funding on its own. It's part of that. Okay, well, I'm happy to move that report then.
Thank you. Councillor Roundtree's moved. Councillor Bland, are you seconding? Is there any just further discussion around the report, the recommendation? Okay, Councillor Roundtree, you finished?
Closed.
Thank you. I put recommendation as it reads. All those in favour? Against, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Number 2, annual 270 annual review section committee, internal review of council decisions. I've made a mess of that in the agenda. There's someone moving that way, Councillor Roundtree and Arthur at this stage. You want to speak to that?
No, thank you.
Councillor Arthur, anyone else wish to speak to the report or the recommendation? Being none, I will put the motion. All those in favour? Those against, that's carried unanimously. Number 3, local government reforms update. There's an error in there apparently. Number 55 on the second page. Section 55. Bridget, can you read it out as I haven't got my mind on it yet?
So in the summary papers in the in number 55, on the right-hand side under action, outside of staging its ordinary and special meetings, council has not staged a meeting of electors and does not envisage, we've just left out the not doing so.
Unclear on that little omission. Councillor Yench. Moving that way. There's a seconder, Councillor Bland. Anyone wants to speak for or against the motion? Closing.
Closed.
I put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Number 4, the caretaker provisions during the local government elections period. Councillors, we receive a note, the update providing regarding the caretaker provisions during the 2022 election process. Councillor Roundtree,
Happy to move it.
for moving that way. There's a second to Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Taylor, that means you may have a question or wish to speak to it.
Sorry? I was seconding it.
Too late.
Oh, sorry.
Sleeping.
I think it was
Councillor Hill did.
Councillor-
She's been trying for a while. Any questions? Debate? There being none? Closing? Yeah, you, councillor Roundtree.
Oh, closed, yes.
Put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That is carried unanimously. Number 5, Country Fire Services, CFS sites 21-year lease extensions. Where this came up before, but this has to be done this way now. Miles, do you wish to add anything? It's authorising the mayor and the CEO to execute the lease extensions for those 4 stations, which council owns in a freehold title. Councillors Qualman and Taylor, I think I'm taking. Is there any discussion, councillors, around this? Being none. Still closing. Thank you. Put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Councillors, I would ask that we have a break till 6:30. I'm well aware there's a large gallery, but we probably needed a break, please, for 7 minutes. 6:30, we start again. On the old Dukes Highway is. See, I'm not going to vote.
It's a good gallery today, Mayor. Wish they
for that. But what I would just give people in the back of the room, if they haven't worked out our process and we still have, where's the bits of paper gone? They're up here now. But if someone else wishes to ask some questions, I'll take it. I will allow that to happen because I didn't explain at the start of the meeting that it is best to ask them beforehand or have them written up beforehand, but I haven't said that in the meeting so far. So with leave granted, I'm going to ask some question time. Emma Swan, Emma, where are you? You've got two separate sort of lines of questions. So you need to come to the front. This is the deal here, and you need to be on the mic. There's no hiding. Make sure she's got the mic, Ashley. We'll just get you to just ask your question. So your question is to sort of the table up here, actually. Your questions around Karkuma Road first, please.
Oh, yep. So just in relation to Karkuma Road, obviously it's a big industry over there, and roads are significant for Coorong District Council. So stakeholders there to see if we are, or if you as council are building the infrastructure to the growing needs of the industry, including the CFI and the transport operators.
CEO or Matt? Both of you have a quick.
Put it through to Matt.
Put it through to Matt.
Design by a qualified engineering company who have done the modelling of the freight needs of CFI and the feedlot, and the pavement design is adequate for that freight movement. The design is for a 36.5 metre pocket road train, so the freight needs will be met. The shoulder will be widened to provide additional width for the longer combination. So I'm confident that the work that is proposed there will meet the freight needs of the industry and agriculture using Karkuma Road.
It's just B-doubles using the road now though.
That one? Go on to your other one if you want to.
Oh, okay.
Give me a bit of room here.
Okay. In a state park, just the question was, previous and that the students put forward discussions around the phase 1 funding. So is the phase 1 funding from the local roads and community infrastructure project of the 200,000 plus the 120K that CDC were going to fund to complete the full build as previously promised, still going to be put towards this project for completion?
Short answer is yes. So, yeah, part of it is in our budget, in last year's budget. Now, someone can refresh me.
Through you, Mayor. Both of those components are still in this year's budget. They were rolled over.
Thank you.
So, board, we're on a roll.
Can we ask questions?
Yes, you actually can. Would you like to before Emma left?
No, I'll wait till I hear.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us. I attended the CAP meeting last month, and as it was stated at that meeting, the noise policy is not mandatory, it's just a recommendation. So considering this, is there an opportunity to build the skate park in 2 stages? And so doing it over 2 financial years, with the first stage being the actual build and then having a 12-month settling in period where we can assess the noise in the community and talk to the residents on West Terrace and, you know, see how they're going with the skate park, and then push. And if it is deemed that there needs to be the wall or some noise altering building done, then this could be in a phase 2 build and pushing that out into the following financial year, just to help, you know, carry the burden if there needs to be more money found for that infrastructure.
Through you, Mayor. The recommendation from the CAP is not a discretionary recommendation. We have to follow it. So if the soundproofing wall is part of that recommendation, we have no discretion not to do that. So the second part is that anything's possible in terms of splitting projects over financial years. The risk if splitting this particular project is that with inflation the way it is, we have no way of we can anticipate probably what the cost might be. And I suspect that there would be a significant cost to splitting the project from a inflationary and the context and the environment we're in at the moment. That's guesswork. Nobody's got a crystal ball about what will happen, but looking at the current trajectory of inflation, that is a risk with all projects of council, not just this one.
So can you just clarify with the recommendation that came out of that cap? Because I was under the impression when he was saying that it was their recommendation to limit the noise, but could only be taken up if council wanted to. It wasn't actually mandatory.
So I'll hand over to the expert in this area,
Yeah.
Miles, who knows all things about CAP, and well, he can be clearer than I am about it.
Certainly, I'll try. So essentially what's been approved is what was presented to CAP, which included a noise wall.
Yeah.
So, and that was on the basis that in order to comply with the EPA noise policy, which is a mandatory policy, an acoustic engineer made the recommendation that noise wall be incorporated. That is where, talk about recommendations, that was the recommendation of an engineer. And maybe the same as, we're building a road, the engineer determines a certain design requirement for the road and we build it so that that road functions in the way that it should and it meets legislative requirements. Same principles here. We have an approval for that. We can't alter from that. If we were to change what has been presented and approved, we're likely to start the process all over again.
Not ideal. Thank you for that.
Has any councillor got any questions? Questions, not statements?
I think the clarity around the funding, given that what the CEO has said, is probably still needed because it's not just going to be 320,000. Am I correct? I also missed a meeting, so.
Well, we are anticipating some updated costings on the skate park project, but we have not got them yet. Now, if we're realistic enough to accept that there probably will be some increased costings.
I'm asking on behalf of the here because I anticipate.
But we don't know that yet. That's the dilemma we face. Your question though, councillor, is?
I guess the question really is up to the ask whether or not it can be funded.
There'll be a debate coming very soon, I think. Any other questions?
We don't know the figures.
Correct.
In the reports at this gets me.
The report, council's reports where we are today, we don't know any more than that today. We're aware that we move into caretaker on the 6th of September, so that's why it had to be brought forward to today, really. Any other questions from councillors to the two presenters? Thank you.
Can we sit down? Can we raise our hand again later?
No.
Good try.
Well, yes, you can, Joe. Yes, there's a way forward. It'll be remiss of me that Ashley could give you the nomination pack, or you could go online for the local government elections. And in November, you may be able to sit on the tables in the room. I'm going to let you have a question because this is around this process here. Thomas, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
I've been in contact with James Clark from the council. He's in some control of the skate park project. I've been updated on whereabouts this project will go ahead. I'm not sure if that's in your hands or your knowledge, but I've been told that it will be going ahead January, February at latest next year.
So I can answer that, Nick. So what James is referring to is that the contractor, when we went back to, once the issue of the sound and the wall was resolved, we went back to the contractor to find out when they would come and would be able to start the contract again, because we had booked them in for an earlier date. They particularly busy, and they've said the earliest they can come back is probably February of next year. So I think that's what James is referring to. So the contractor is booked in because we were proceeding with the project, but we need to come back to council for the extra funding because we know that the wall costs some money, and we know that, as I mentioned before, the inflation will push out the costs because it's been 2 years now that we've been talking with the contractor.
Do we have any certain dates on whenabouts this will actually start?
The contractor is booked in for, I think it's early February. But as the intent of the report to council today is that the councillors now have to debate whether there's extra money going towards the project or is there some other way that the project either continues or not continues. So we can't continue if there's no extra money allocated to the project because of the costs.
Is fundraising the way for us to provide funding for that wall, or is that something that has to come through council?
So you mean fundraising is always an option. If a community group, and it's a bit like the fundraising you're already doing, it will be earmarked, whatever assets the fundraising achieves would be put towards, it would be a donated asset to council at the end of the day. So fundraising is always an option.
Sorry, thanks, Carl. Does anyone else just, I'm doing a bit of liberty here. Okay. I'll take that as the end of question time, please, councillors. Return to infrastructure and assets 12.1 capital projects funding strategy. Karkuma Road. Capital project. The recommendation, but prior to that recommendation, I will declare a interest or a conflict of interest in relation to 2. Which one? It's B, it's B, isn't it? 2.B, which happens to be the road past my place. It's a perceived asset, Ashley. And I will not vote, but I will stay in the chamber. Thank you. There's a recommendation, councillors. 1 capital project strategy for the Karkuma Road. Someone want to move that way, please?
Could I just, Mr. Mayor, could I just ask why you've just received conflict of interest in, is it 2B?
Road that would be removed under this report is the road past my place. I declared it when we had the budget. Some people may perceive that I'm trying to advantage myself by not declaring it, we take it off as well. As you know, there's some people are watching this closely around conflict of interest. And
yeah,
so I'm simply trying to be as open as I can. I can't help that I live on that road.
Wouldn't you say you're not getting, you're actually losing out by not having the road done?
Well, some people might think that I have other plans. Councillor Leng.
Thank you. Question for a moment, Chair. We just asked the Director Infrastructure what priority 3 sealed roads are going to be affected by Part B. Does it include 7 Mile Road?
Through the chair, further on in the report, there's an agenda item regarding the capital works program, and the level 3 roads are listed in there. The decision on which roads will be potentially deferred to the 23-24 will be based on risk, rather than on picking a road now. So it's going to be an ongoing discussion, and we'll determine which of those priority 3 roads will be pushed out into 23-24. It doesn't mean they're not going to be done. They'll just be done in the next budget.
Thank you.
Councillor Leng, are you moving? You're moving the recommendation in its entirety?
Yes.
The seconder, Councillor Rountree, you the seconder?
I am.
There's some debate around this. Councillor Leng, you want to start?
No.
You want to speak as the seconder?
Mr. Mayor.
I'll reserve to the end.
Yeah, just wait on. I reckon I saw Councillor Taylor's arm, I thought.
You did? Thank you, Matt. So this is an incredible blowout. I've had a large number of messages from members of the public, which I will pass on to the CEO, for their names. Regarding the fact, comments such as, yet again, other roads are suffering as a result of having to find another 800,000 for this particular project. So my concern is that this is not going to be the last overrun on the budget. What I don't want to do is to go back to a situation where our roads are in disrepair because we can't find the money, and we can't keep drawing the money. You know, there's only so many vehicles that we can not buy or not replace. There is only so many roads that we don't seal. There are only so many unsealed roads that we don't do the work for. So that is a recommendation for this year, which will now roll over and maybe into next year. But what's next down the list? That's the problem. Which road is next that requires extra funding in order to complete? And I can think of a very big one that's likely going to need extra money as well. So how are we not only going to fund this realistically without borrowing? We can see what's on the page here, but what's on the page here amounts to what, 625? So I maybe missed where the other small bit came from for the 800. Maybe it was the LRCIP, I'm not sure. That's my problem with it, is because we're potentially heading into a period of financial instability as a nation, and costs are not likely to be coming down. This is going to roll right across every road potentially that we have to maintain or reconstruct or construct, etc. So that's my biggest concern. Thank you.
Councillor Yantch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually concur with Councillor Taylor. I think we are headed into catastrophic times as far as attaining grants, budgets, finances. It is going to be a balancing act, and we are going to have to fulfill obligations as best we can, and we will have to cut our cloth accordingly. The incoming council is going to be handed something pretty dreadful to deal with. Thank you.
Councillor Qualman, then Councillor Bland, then Councillor Arthur.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with the previous two councillors. 800,000. Now, there's only a certain amount of pot of gold or money that we have to work on. And unfortunately, this is another big blowout that's going to affect our ability to maintain our current assets, and with some uncharted and headwinds that we are now facing nationally, globally, you name it. The uncertainty is pretty painful, actually. And I have deep concerns that this is going to be a legacy on our budget performance in years to come, and maintaining our assets. And we should seriously consider no new assets, but maintaining our existing assets. Otherwise, we're never going to catch up. Thank you.
Councillor Bland.
I also agree with the majority of what's been said, but however, we also need to move forward as multiple communities in maintaining and improving assets. My question around this is around the RLCIP program, and we did hear before from Matt that there's potential for that to be coming out very soon. Do we think that will have any significant effect should we be successful?
So you're referring to the LRCIP.
Sorry, LRCIP, yeah.
Whereas your question is not around the Special Local Roads Program, which is partially funding this anyway.
Yep.
Which we're in the second year of funding of this particular project.
Yeah.
Different projects.
Yep.
Quite different.
The LRCIP.
Different groups of funding, but we understand they are basically locked in funding.
Say that again.
We understand they're locked in funding, like they're not subject to any other political processes.
Okay.
At the end of your question.
Well, partially. I think the other part of the question comes down, and I think I know we can't do a great deal about it from a council point of view at this time, but we should be lobbying big business where we're having to look at major roads that are primary users of that. And I understand from planning in the past that that is particularly difficult. But I do think it's about time we actually looked at big business around that. I'm sure there's ways of doing it, because we are not going to get some of this stuff done, no matter how much money we throw at some of it.
Councillor Arthur.
I'd just like to say I'm disappointed at the cost. Everybody would be. It was 600,000 the other week and now it's 800,000. Unfortunately, it's one of those jobs that has to be done. And I must say we're not orphans in this. I was at the Limestone Coast LGA meeting last Friday, and most councils there that had projects out for costing have come back about 30–40% over what they estimated. Tony Passon addressed the meeting and he said, the rivers of gold are over. There'll be it'll be very hard to get grants now. Although he did say that the road grant has been already passed through. The
local roads process.
Yeah, whichever it was, yeah.
So
that is a council grant. So they have honoured that contract. So, but unfortunately, but it's one of those things we've got to do. I suppose in the long run, we're probably saving ourselves $150,000 plus on repairs and maintenance on that road every year. So that's about the only bonus.
Councillor Hill.
Yes, in the balancing act of trying to attract big business into the district, but also creating a burden on the ratepayers and residents that have to foot the bill in a lot of cases for this. I mean, do we get to a point where we don't encourage big, huge businesses like this because it's going to just blow out our roads budget? I mean, it would be very disappointing because we need growth in the area. We need jobs, we need growth, but yeah, the costs are just getting too hard for small councils like ours to try and afford. So yeah, how do we deal with this sort of issue in the future?
So yeah, that's a good question, councillor. And suppose I'd reflect with this road, Carcooma Road, that it would be a priority road anyway in our greater plans. We refer to Heinrich Road, well, that is a different kettle of fish, and that is where I would anticipate whoever's in this chair in the near future will be lobbying the state government in particular, because so far the state government doesn't put money into these processes. So I take on board what you're saying. That's the dilemma we face. To get jobs, we sometimes have to have businesses that are in, for very good reasons, well away from towns, but therefore cost a lot more to service. Councillor Roundtree.
So I have a question and a statement. Question is and this is probably through to the director.
For me.
For you. That's what I said. What would a road with $800,000 less spent on it look like?
You want me to give you a short answer?
Is it shorter? Is it thinner? Is it worse?
I'll reflect on another road which this council's dealing with right now, which is costing a lot of money, and that's called Poltallic Road.
Mm.
Now, I'm not going to blame anyone around what happened there because a lot of things went wrong, a lot of things. But the reality is, I think we're reflecting on the process now is that we build it right the first time. But I think, Matt, do you want to add to that? Could you be, what would be this project's I've got a lot of road widening in this process, as well as 2 kilometres of brand new road.
So through you, Chair, there's sort of 3 components to the project. The first section is the widening of Carcooma Road between the Dukes Highway and Heinrich Road, which is going to need to be widened and the shoulders work done at, irrespective of whether TFI was there or not. That's a renewal project that we would be having to fund within the next 3 to 5 years, irrespective of where TFI is there. We are currently being funded 2/3, 1/3 for that. So we're getting a renewal project for 1/3 of the cost. That's point one. Second point, the intersection of Heinrich Road and Carcooma Road, which is a function of having TFI there. The third section is the section between Heinrich Road and the entrance to the feedlot, which is currently unsealed and currently has a significant maintenance burden on the council. So we spend a fortune keeping that road up to scratch as an unsealed road. We would be required to renew that road, i.e. resheet it, pretty much immediately. We are getting that money and we're getting a renewal project for a third of the cost because the federal government is funding it. We are then going to seal that, which reduces or eliminates the burden of having to patrol grader and resheet it regularly. To reduce the price by the $800,000 would mean we would only do the shoulder widening or would only do the reconstruction from Carcooma, from Heinrich Road North. But the funding is contingent on us doing the whole project.
Thank you.
That's the dilemma we have.
Thank you. I'll just continue then. So one of the things I think our council need to do is work harder with the LGA. I mean, if all councils are in this predicament and we're not sure what the future looks like out there, I think as country and regional councils, we need to really get them on side, and we need to be making a lot more noise because we need that state funding and those grants to keep flowing to our regions. Otherwise, things are going to go backwards very quickly. It is unfortunate that these roads are costing more than we have budgeted for. Every business that is out there now is suffering the same thing with regards to materials costs. And I'm a long proponent of tightening the belt. It's always been my policy, is to just tighten things up wherever we can. However, what I'm hearing and what I understand is that this road is and will be a safety issue. I think there's a school bus that use parts of this road as well. Is that right, Councillor Arthur? Through you, Mayor. Sorry. So this is why I sort of feel this one, as gut wrenching as it is to have to do this, I don't see how we can't not do it. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't do it. So that's why I'll be supporting this motion.
Okay, you're the seconder. I'll take it you've spoken.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Everyone has spoken. So Councillor Lang, you can close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't, like everyone else, like the blow that's happened, but it is or has become a major road for heavy trucks in particular. Possibly because of Thomas Foods feedlot, but it's got to be done. It's got to be done. We've got to bite the bullet on.
Thank you. I'll take that as closed, Councillor.
Close.
The recommendation is as it reads in the agenda and on the screen. Same thing, actually, isn't it? I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? It's carried unanimously, and I did not vote, Ashley, even though I got my hand half in the air. Item 2, Councillor Taylor. Item 2 is, where have I gone? Sorry, capital projects funding the Menangle Scape. I'll start with you, Councillor Tabor. You wish to move the recommendation?
No, Mayor, I do not. I wish to move that this be deferred until the 30th of August for a special council meeting, which gives the director time to get or hopefully enough time to get the accurate figures which needs to be budgeted. So we've got an estimate at the moment for 70 and 50. So we don't want to be wrong either way. We don't want it to be over, and it'd be fantastic if it's on. But there was a big discussion last week regarding alternatives or possible solutions. So this is to give the director as much time as he can, but before we go into caretaker period, to get all of those options analysed, and then to get a final figure presented to us. My problem always coming in from industry is how we can't lock projects like this into fixed contracts. I can hear the CEO in my, I can hear the CEO as I say these words, that local government is not industry. And I think after 4 years, I might have got that. I just think we need to give the director the 2 weeks, the extra 2 weeks.
So just councillor, just so that we give us as the maximum room that may be required, be prepared to change the deferred till the latest time is the 5th of September.
I was thinking of the 30th because we've already got a draft growth strategy
Okay, well, that's
on
fine.
that date.
Motion. I'm just trying to make sure. I ask
So through you, Mayor.
through where we were at with the tightening the figures up.
So we are in conversation with the contractor. As you're right, we don't have that information yet. Do we have an anticipated date from them yet? So soon.
So I would think, well, unless you really think we need to push it out further.
Well, no, I can call a special council meeting or 3 councillors. I'll take that as, you know, as it is, but for some reason needs to be a few days later, we might have to, but I'd much rather the council had all the information it could ever get in front of it.
So should I change that then to before caretaker period? And that gives you
I'd like you to
latitude?
do that, just because at the end of the day, special meetings are called by the mayor.
Yes.
This gives us the room to, there's much information to work out how to pay for the potential overrun here possible.
Mr Mayor, I have a question.
Are you going to second it, councillor?
I have a question. Councillor Taylor indicated that there was significant discussion on options. Given that A, I wasn't here, and B, we have a room full of interested parties in relation to the SCART part, I'd like to know what those options were.
Yep, okay. Can I just ask for take that on notice just for a second? Can I get a seconder for this one? Councillor Qualman's the seconder, actually. So the question, Councillor Bland, you ask is what other options, and I think Cohen did mention it, are available to try and keep the cost of this within the present budget. Matt, do you want to have a go? Or?
I'll just start off the conversation.
Yep.
So councillor's right, there was conversations about whether if we move the location, did we still need a wall in terms of sound? So there are other locations there. Remembering that the starting point for this one was that there wanted to be some synergy between parents who would look after their children who are on the playground as well as in the skate park. So that's why that particular location was chosen in the first place. There are other options on that precinct, if you like. The risk of changing that is that until we know where that may be, we're not sure whether it would mitigate the need for a sound wall, but it would also maybe trigger again a development application depending on the design and location. Is that right, Miles? So any changes are not without risk in terms of do we start again? And we don't know that until you'd work through the process again. It would also necessitate, although probably not mandatory, but going back to council for back to the community for consultation, given the amount of consultation that's happened to date and the buy-in from the community.
So my follow-up question is, so that was the only concern, was the location? Because I have heard a number of other things since I have returned, and that is around the size, the money maybe being reallocated elsewhere, and I'm just wondering whether that's part of this consideration at this point.
The location was one, and it was in an attempt to find a way to mitigate the costs. There was also some discussion about if you shrunk the project to fit within the funding envelope, what that might look like. And their discussions we've also had with the contractor to date. They were the main two. The funding, as I think the question on notice or the question up here was, funding as it stands is still there. There's no, what I think maybe the confusion is that what we would have to do in some way, depending on the delay, is because some of the funding is from the LRCIP process, we would have to switch a few projects around so that we could make sure we met deadlines. But we do that all the time with projects.
So my other question, Mr Mayor, and I know that you get to call the special meetings. So will that meeting be at a time when, should the interested parties in relation to the skate park be actually able to attend, given the distance?
I would hope so. Myself or 3 councillors call a special meeting.
Yes, I'm aware of the
In this situation,
process.
it would be made.
It's the timing I'm interested in
No,
relation.
I've taken on board the
Anything.
earliest discussion around that we're here for a growth strategy, presume in the afternoon,
In the morning.
3 o'clock, but I take on board that there's high public interest in it and we might see what we can do.
I've got it at 10 a.m.
You know,
Sorry, mate.
changing.
It's a 3-hour workshop. I think we've got it finishing
Okay.
shortly after lunchtime.
Anyway, I don't know what other dates are between now and the 6th that are available to everyone, but deal with that. Any more questions from you?
I'm thinking.
Yeah, I know, I can see. Councillor Hill.
2 questions. I can understand councillor Taylor's concern over that we've got a unknown figure. And so first question is, why was this item brought to this meeting when we don't have accurate figures? I mean, that's asking us to make a decision on something that we've got no idea about. So, and in view of the fact that we have a lot of interest in this skate park from a long history, to have people come to a meeting expecting a decision to be made, which can't be made at the moment, really, is a bit unfair. And I think the item probably should have waited until we did have an accurate figure. So is there a reason why this was presented to this meeting?
You want to go first?
No.
So the consideration was more that we were going into caretaker period and we needed some certainty from the chamber about whether we go ahead or not. As you heard, we've locked in the contractor for February, but there will be a point where we would have to go back to them and say, we don't want you in February because we don't have the money to do this project. And so it was to, I suppose, get some guidance from council about whether we needed to go back to the contractor and say, we don't need you in February because we can't afford the or that there was a guidance from council to say, yes, we're keen to continue the project. And so we would leave the contractor locked in place.
Second question. So as someone who is currently in the process of trying to build a house, I had signed a contract and I was presented with a variation of $24,000 of the costs that have increased since I've signed a contract. I then went back to the builder and said, I don't know if I want to build this house. Maybe I'll redesign it, make it smaller and perhaps have less cost that way. And so it's back within my budget. The builder said that if we have to redesign the house, it would have to go right back through the whole process again. And by the time the approvals were received, etc., it would probably cost the same amount of money, if not more. So my question is, if we've got to go back, like to look at new locations, redesign, all that sort of thing, we would have to go back through possibly even a community consultation about noise again, and possibly cost us more than what this current project is allocated for. So is that a possibility if we have to go back to the drawing board?
You mean that was the point I made earlier, councillor, that those are unknowns in a sense. And we can, in a sense, you can design anything to fit within the funding envelope, but the environment is making that very difficult.
Well, I'd be very disappointed if the current design couldn't be maintained, because it is fit for purpose, and we don't want something that's going to be not fit for purpose.
Miles.
To your worship, I'll just offer this. In terms of site selection, we would assess the site against the noise policy. So we would spend a small amount of money to have an engineering study done, noting there's already, if we're in the same locality, we already have a certain amount of engineering intelligence has already been produced, and we wouldn't move forward with a project that had a noise wall. So we try to find a site that didn't require a noise wall.
Councillor, yeah, we're in an unusual dilemma. because we've got the caretaker period breathing on us, and I take your point about bringing a report to council, which we were probably hoping we might have some more information at this stage. They're I suppose the best estimate. So the motion as at the moment at least still gives us an opportunity to review it on the basis of expected costs. Still might end up with unknown figures. The communities went through a long time in deciding on that site. So it would be pretty sad to have to move it on the basis of at this point, some unknown costs. Nonetheless, unknown costs in the wall, the mound, or whatever the noise attenuation will be. So at this stage, I think we'd be prudent to continue with the model we've got now, the design. That's my view. But what this motion is saying is that we simply hope to get the best cost we can on what it will cost before 7th of September. There would be, to a degree, and the potential to wait till the new council in a way, but I don't think that's fair on the staff or the contractor at that point. We're going to commit to a February next year build. That's our dilemma, is the squeeze of time we're in. Councillor Jentsch, then Councillor Rountree.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment. I believe, like we all do, that these projects are difficult, they are expensive, but I also believe that we have an obligation to the Meningie community to proceed with this, considering the length of time we have taken to get to this point. So my amendment is the motion's 2 points that there are, 1 and 2, with the third one being that on the presentation of the final budget allocation, be it $120,000 as predicted, if that falls $20,000 over that prediction, then the council does have its special meeting. But if it falls under 20,000 over that prediction, then we go ahead with the project, because to delay it, to redesign it, rejig it, put it somewhere else, we're going to be paying a lot more money. We need to get cracking. We don't know what the economic climate is going to be by this time next year. It will probably be far more difficult. If that's the case, this project may never get off the ground. This is the last chance to get this project going correctly. Most of the money is grant money. And when we get a final calculation on the cost, and I am sure that we have staff that can screw these contractors down,
Can we have a point of
we
order,
may
Mayor?
find,
Can we have a
Councillor,
point of order, please, Mayor?
Those words are probably,
well,
Fear mongering, Mayor, is just not helping anything.
I'm going to ask him to withdraw the word screw down.
well, I withdraw the words screw down. We can get them to tighten their costings and hopefully come in on or under budget.
You're moving it as it reads?
Yes.
We haven't got.
And point 3 is that if the anticipated cost, the extra costs are 20,000 above the 120 as predicted, that we have our special meeting prior to the caretaker period.
Councillor, does that reflect your intent?
The anticipated cost of received are within 20,000 of the anticipated budget project, which is the anticipated budget blowout is 120. So it is 20 above the 120 anticipated. We proceed.
It needs
Less.
clarity. It's reasonable.
I don't want it more, but I would like to see this project proceed. I think it is important.
Through you, Mayor, can I just ask a
Have you got a
question?
question?
Yeah, it's just a question. One of the things that was discussed were alternatives and costing of those alternatives. So I think what councillor Yench is saying is that if the material costs only have increased with no other changes, we do this. But we actually asked council to come back to us, which is what's reflected in councillor Taylor's motion, is costing for alternatives and costing for all solutions. I think just to have if it doesn't come in at this price, we'll do this, is not quite the answer either. I think we had already agreed at the workshop that we wanted to see more options, and those options fully costed. So councillor Yench's motion doesn't quite cover that. It only covers one part of it. And I think that it's important we look at all solutions to this issue. And if I may continue, Mayor,
You said
council, well, it's, okay.
You got a question, you're not speaking. Councillors, I've decided that I cannot accept the amendment. It's substantially different to the motion.
Sorry, it is
Substantially different. Substantially different, and therefore it cannot be an amendment. Back to the original motion, councillor Rountree.
Yes, I just wanted to say that we have to be mindful in this community that this could easily blow out to a $500,000 project. And that is, and council isn't just putting in a small amount. We're now putting in, we'll be putting in the majority. We're going to be, if we follow this, $240,000 with the grant funding of only $200,000. So it is significant. When you consider Salt Creek have wanted toilets, and there are other places in the community that have been desperately looking for different things, we need to just make sure this is balanced. I think we've allocated a substantial amount of money to the project. I would like to see what staff come back with regards to the options. If we're without options, we want to see the skate. We will agree. We want the skate park and we want to see it built. And it's just unfortunate that we ended up in the position of having to build this wall and then having the delay, which has seen the cost blow out. That we couldn't, that was unavoidable. The will of the council was to build the skate park. In what format that happens, let's not be precious. Let's just get a skate park built for the kids within the budget that this council can sustain without setting ourselves a really bad precedent here of major overruns on a new asset.
Thank you. Councillor Bland.
Well, yes, on the motion, let's not talk about overruns when we've actually used RLCIP money, grant money on significant overruns already and use council money in a major asset used by a small amount of people. But in relation to, yes, I'm going to the, I'll stick to it.
Coming into the election process, when people make statements that I don't know what you're talking about, you're probably going to need to say that, because I'm going to start to clamp down on that sort of statement, to be quite
Yes, well, at this point in time, to go back and rejig, reassess the whole project, A, is a costly matter, and B, it will only blow out even further if we do that. If I might ask the question, was it not said in this room when we discussed the grants originally as to why the original figure was set for this, that we would consider borrowing money if needed? Now, that was said in this room by councillors, and I would be quite happy if somebody wants to support me in that fact. I do not believe we have time, given we are about to go into caretaker, to do this without ending up with significant blowout, let alone costings on alternatives. That is not what the community has asked for.
Are you speaking for or against the motion?
I'm speaking against.
So, sorry, if I could just take, without trying to lead the meeting, all this is doing, this motion, is awaiting, and the director said he was hoping to have the cost by today, and I take councillor Hill's point about an incomplete report, I take that we can get a far better figure on the figure, a far better timeline on the figure, and that is, and today's the 15th, and I'm going for the date today.
16th.
16th, there you go. And so we've got a couple of weeks. I think that's a realistic opportunity if that motion was to be carried to get a lot better costings. That's not changing the site. That motion is not changing the site. It's not changing anything, actually. It's just trying to tidy the costings up.
Thank you.
Councillor Arthur.
One of the things was talked about was relocation. Change the design to maybe a smaller skate park. We probably all agree, and so we would like to see the skate park at Meningie, but I cannot believe that we could have a $440,000 project at this point in time. It was $200,000 to start off with. Then it got another $120,000 added to it. Now it's another $120,000. With all due respect to all elected members, and I appreciate the people from Meningie that are here, but you know, like $440,000 on this project is outlandish. And in my opinion, we could look at a smaller version. Go down to, I sent designs through some time ago, what they've got at Bordertown and Keith. Nowhere near this. But no one has changed the design from day one. It's okay to have, I like to drive a Mercedes, but I can't afford it. And this design is a Mercedes design. And I think at the present moment, the council have got to look more at buying Commodores. That's all I've got to say, and I will be voting for the motion.
Don't make Commodores anymore.
Always have rubbish.
One to one. Councillor Taylor,
Question,
hope you got a question, yes?
question through you, Mayor, to the director. Is there any chance when the costings do come in of getting it fixed?
Through you, Chair, yes, it would be. The issue with the cost not being fixed is we originally had a contract for the constructor to deliver the project, and we were actually in breach of contract. We didn't deliver on the contract in the first stage. So we had to go back, and now we've entered into another contract. So potentially we're in risk of being in breach of contract again. So the plan is to get a fixed price, which is all our tenders are fixed contracts, and deliver it as per the final price, which we're hoping to get very soon, in February next year. That's our progress. That's how we're planning to deliver the project going forward.
Thank you.
Question? Mayor?
I'll go to there, then over there. Councillor Hill, sorry, you go first.
Please, can we stop referring to it as the Meningie Skate Park? It is as much as a district skate park as the Canalpin Pool is a district pool. So I just feel that there's a lot of focus on calling it a Meningie asset and not a Coorong District Council asset. Thank you.
Beautiful, thank you. Councillor Bland?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, if Matt might explain what might entail a breach of contract for this current project.
We've engaged the contractor, through you, Chair, engaged the contractor to deliver a piece of work for us that we've had tendered. If we don't deliver that on that contract, they could potentially take us to court of arbitration and claim money.
So what sort of money might we have to pay?
I would doubt that would occur.
However, what might it occur?
I couldn't answer that question, sorry.
So generally in those types of, through you, Mayor, it's the money lost and possibly court costs. But that, as the director says, we don't know what that was.
So the time period that he's lost money has now been a couple of years
Yeah,
on the original contract?
In the report, it details the timelines of when their initial price or fee offer was provided. And that is in pushing, by the time they start, if they start close to 2 years.
Reasonable amount of money lost, I would have thought.
In that time, a planning issue has got in the road. Anyone else wish to add to this debate? I'm still on the motion. Councillor Qualman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question, and we talk about legalities of breach of contracts. What happens then? Surely in this contractor is not meeting our demands except for a price. Isn't there some sort of governing effect to keep the price down?
Variance.
Please.
Through the chair, Councillor Arthur alluded to a project meeting at Limestone Coast where other councils have experienced a 30 to 40% increase in costs recently. The cost of doing business and the cost of living has gone up. 2 years ago, I paid $1.40 for petrol. Today, I pay $2. When we initiated this project in February 2020, the cost of doing business is completely different to the cost of doing business today. So it's just it's a reality. There's no way we can deliver the original project at the current budget today with the cost of doing business that we're facing.
One last thing, remembering that the 120,000 that we've quoted in here, more than half of that is for the wall where we didn't expect that we would have to have a noise attenuating wall. So the cost has increased, but there's also a new asset as part of building this one that we are required now to do.
Okay, I think we're nearly there, councillors. Looking at councillor Taylor because it's her motion at the moment.
Can I speak?
You will speak and close. I can't pick anyone else wishing to speak now.
Thank you, Mayor. So the document says an estimated 70,000 and an estimated 50,000. This motion gives the staff time to lock in exactly how much money it will be, so we know exactly what we are authorising, and so that it doesn't have to go to the next council. We have heard the contractor has been booked. This is another 2 weeks to get a fixed price. That's all. So the scaremongering around overruns, whether or not the project will go ahead, is scaremongering. The CEO has made it plain the 320,000 is locked in and the contractor is booked. The question is, how much exactly do you need in extra funding? So if it's 120,000 estimated, it might not be. It might be more. So rather than have to come back to the new council and say we need another X, we need to authorise what will be spent to bring this project in. Thank you. And I will close.
Thank you, councillor. So the motion is as you read it, that the capital projects funding strategy Menangi Community Skate Park item be deferred to a special council meeting at a later date to take place prior to the commencement of the caretaker period to enable time to be provided for us to be provided with accurate budget figures for the project. Those in favour of the motion, please show. Voting for the motion is councillors Taylor, Qualman, Arthur, Rountree, Hill and Simmons. Those voting against, councillors Bland, Lang and Yench. So I declare the motion carried. I move on to the next agenda item, please, which is Menangi Pelican sculpture. There is a recommendation. Councillors Bland, you're going to move the recommendation?
I would move the recommendation with a slight modification with the consideration that this also be referred for discussion and potential funding of opportunities to the RAP committee. And the reasoning, if I might, Mr. Mayor. So basically I'm asking for point 6 to include discussion with the RAP committee in relation to this option, and I will tell you why.
RAP being Reconciliation Action Plan.
Correct.
And
first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the input from a recent, and I won't mention his name here, but an Aboriginal person who was significantly involved in discussion in this piece. He has recently passed away. And I think it is important that the council acknowledge that the Pelican, the Nori, which is very important to the Nurrinjeri people, was actually done as a part of reconciliation, and hence the children at the bottom feeding the pelican, which is also a part of the environmental issues that at that time was happening in the Meningie area. So I support this motion, given that not only is it a reconciliation piece, while its funding didn't say that, it was always the intent. And therefore, it needs to be considered seriously about finding funding to replace that into a suitable position so that consider and work together as one community. That piece of art, reconciliation piece, has never, ever had any issues or concerns in relation to defacing. It has been a great piece of art in terms of bringing people together. And I would like to see us consider that seriously, but also the next piece be acknowledged as a.
I'd like to second that motion.
Go on the voice. You want to speak, councillor Hill?
I'll reserve.
Councillor Jens, you had also your hand up. I think.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I'm in favour of this motion, but I have a question in regards when the structure is taken down, presumably in a safe manner. I presume what it is will be stored in a safe manner until the incoming council can determine what will happen to it. It doesn't necessarily need to be removed and taken out the back and thrown out back behind the shed. It needs to be stored with a significant amount of respect.
Through you, Mayor, we would have to come back to council as to what the disposal was of and the Arbus report is fairly focused on the deterioration of the pelican. That's not to say that we can't store it. We've had some discussions about what next. The original artist has also contacted me to say he's happy to have it back. But in terms of process of disposing of assets, we do have a asset disposal policy, and the first part of it would probably be that our recommendation would be that the pelican, that community groups may be interested in it, almost like a buyer beware, but in terms of taking it. If there was no interest in it, we could, a bit like we did with other assets we have, we could auction it. But there would be a report to council about what we would do with it next.
So the
It is not in a fit state, and to be honest, we're not too sure how it will actually move.
Look, I understand that, and I thank you for that response. All I'm referring to is once it is down, it needs to be housed in a manner that will not necessarily damage it further, and that the community or someone may find a use for it if council chooses to pass it on. Thank you.
Councillor Roundtree.
Whose job is it to source the public art funding? Is that something council does? Okay.
For you, Mayor, yes, we would, if it was a project that was significant, remembering we've got a project register, we would pop it on there. And then as grants become available, we would look to one that matched it.
Councillor Hill's got a question, then Councillor Taylor.
Would this be something that the reconciliation committee would be able to take on as an opportunity?
To you, Mayor, remembering it is only a working group that comes together, so it would be with the support of staff to do that.
Councillor Taylor.
Through you, Mayor, are we at risk of locking the future council into something that they have other ideas for? So we're looking at this recommendation is for a replacement sculpture. The incoming committee might have bigger and other ideas.
Yeah, so point 6, I don't think commits the new council to anything.
0.5.
Investigate, I mean, I don't think it commits anyone to anything.
Because I don't want the incoming council locked into a sculpture. They might choose something completely unique.
Through you, Mayor, it doesn't lock the council into anything. And in fact, even if we were to apply for a grant that landed in our laps tomorrow, and by the time you get through the process, the new council would be in place, we would bring it back if that was the desire of council, and you can always give a grant back. So it doesn't lock in anything at all. It just is asking that we explore if there are grants available.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? There being no one else, councillor Bland, you're going to close.
I consider it closed.
Thank you. So the motion is as it reads, that minor, it was as in the report, but that minor addition of the, not minor, but with the wrap. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against, that's carried unanimously. Number 4, 2022-23 Capital Works Program. Councillors, recommend that we receive and note the report and endorse the list of identified projects with delivery as part of the capital renewal programs adopted in the 22-23 annual business plan report. Councillor Taylor.
Moved.
Moving that way. You're a seconder. Councillor Roundtree, you the seconder.
Yes.
Anyone else want to speak to that listing?
Question.
Yes, councillor Ban.
That is, through you, Mr Mayor, to Matt, do we actually believe we can deliver this?
Through you, Chair. It's an absolute stretch. It is going to be a lot of tough work, but I'm confident we're going to give it a absolute best shot. We've engaged additional contractors to assist in the road reconstruction and resheeting works, and we're pushing as hard as we can. But this is the type of budget that we're going to need to continue to deliver going forward if we're going to meet our renewal targets. So we need budgets and programs of this nature going forward.
Through you, Mayor. And remember the comment the director made earlier in the piece is that we have the category of roads, and it may not be going from 1 to 3 in that order. They will be based on risk at some point. So.
Anyone else? Closing.
I'd like to thank the director. It's an unenviable task now, dealing with roads, our roads across the district. Absolutely unenviable. Closed.
Councillors, it is as it reads. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against, that's carried unanimously. I'll move to item 13, which is petitions, which I have none, I believe. Item 14, deputations, we have already dealt with. Is there no additional public question time questions? Actually, I don't believe. Item 15 comes information document. Councillors, is there anything in item 15 that you wish to? Councillor Arthur first.
Through you, Mr Mayor, to the Director of Infrastructure. Rating program, which has dropped back dramatically, and according to the comments, because graders construction work. Where's this happened? And how many graders have been taken?
That in the information document, councillor, is it?
Yeah, it's in the information document.
So through your chair, it occurred through on 7 Mile Road, the resheeting of 7 Mile Road, when we had staff member, construction grader staff member on leave. Plus we had a COVID case at the Tintinara grader and another a staff member on leave. So there has been a reduction in grading operations in July due to leave, but the construction grader operator on 7 Mile Road and was replaced with a patrol grader operator.
Because the way it reads that the maintenance grader's gone on to construction work. Yeah, so that clarifies that. Thank you.
Councillor Roundtree, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, I did. So I got a couple. Under the playgrounds renewal program, which playgrounds are being considered?
Through the chair, that hasn't been confirmed yet.
Okay,
There is the plan was to get funding to do the Lions. We had $100,000 in the budget to do the Lions Park at Meningie, and that $100,000 was for the renewal of the shelters, work on the sculpture, and the replacement of the outdoor gym area. Now that funding is currently unlikely, the $100,000 will be focused on the shelters and the renewal of the playgrounds, which is a separate budget item, may need to go to that project or another one, but it's yet to be determined or confirmed.
okay. And I just noted, I mean, with your infield works report, I thought the way you laid it out was really good. Easy to see. With the park, with the skate park, and I was just reading the information down further, it said the park will incorporate a range of disciplines, including skating, scooter riding and BMX. I don't feel I was aware of the scope of that. So it was, and probably that in my mind, not being a skateboarder, when I visualize what it looks like, some of those areas would be specific to scooters or BMX. Is that right? Or did that get changed?
No, skate parks are designed for a multitude of uses. If you design it only for skateboard use, despite its name, children and young adults tire of it very quickly, and it's also not suitable for a range of ages. So the
Right.
skate park is designed for a range of ages.
I think in my mind through email, I just wasn't clear on that. I didn't realize we were building BMX scooters, riding. Yeah. So then I thought, well, is that why this is a bigger park? Is because we've done that? No.
No, they're generally built to accommodate a range of ages, and a range of ages use different pieces of equipment to use the park.
Right. Thank you.
Including rollerblades.
Right. And my last one was when committees like the Canalpin Hall are no longer required to submit minutes and information from the committee is no longer on our agenda, how does council intend to stay abreast of the committee's requests and suggestions? And B, how are elected members going to be kept informed? And I ask that because if you're a rep on that committee and you don't know what the relationship is with council, you sort of get a bit blindsided when you go to a meeting and they say, oh, look, we've been asking council for this and that, and I'm like, I have no idea. So I'm wondering how that process will work with keeping us informed of those sorts of assets and those live committees.
That's through you, Mayor. That was also a question at the last council meeting, and
I don't feel I have a good answer.
so what we will do is with any other requests from the community around a particular council asset that needs attention, a CRM, a customer relationship management request will be created, and then it will be prioritised along with other work. The person who raises the request in the community also gets some acknowledgement that that's been noted.
So through you, Matt, these committees that are still meeting, they'll allocate someone to then put in the CRM?
It's up to them,
How they
councillor.
manage that? Okay, I think there is a process here that is not clear to them, and I feel not really overly clear. I suppose it's one of those things, maybe we just work through it and it becomes clear as we do it. But I do get the impression that it's not quite.
So
that
through you, Mayor,
clear.
we have council assets all over the place where there's no committee who looks after them.
Sure.
And we take residents' requests about those particular assets all the time that need some work, whether it's roads or something else. So that is no different to what we do now.
I think the only difference is there's been a long-standing committee at the Canalpin Hall who are still quite invested in the hall and who are still planning to meet reasonably regularly, maybe not do minutes. So the mindset of change from what they did to now, here's 10 things that need to be fixed. Let's sit here and put in 10 CRMs rather than a list of, it won't be 10, but my point is that process needs to be better understood. And I feel like I need to help explain it. But I need to get my head around it too. It's a big change for them.
And through you, Mayor, we're happy to, I think Miles has been down to that committee meeting a
Yes,
couple of times
he
and went
has.
through the process. I'm sure there's no reason why we can't do something similar again.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Yench?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to CEO, please. Meetings attended, 25th, Civets Solutions Affordable Housing via Zoom. Is there anything in it for council?
Oh, the Civitas one.
Yes.
Yes, so that is the continuation of the work that I brought to council a couple of councils ago, which looks at affordable housing in partnership with the three other councils, which is Tatiara, Narra Court, Lucendale and Southern Mallee. And it is just a continuation of that. We've currently gone to the local government association who has some research money grants, and we're waiting the outcome of that. So we're hoping that that will pay for the feasibility study that Civitas is recommending that we do prior to any work being done in that area.
Thank you.
And when we attended the meeting, was it last week with Minister Nick Champion, I think he's Minister for Housing, we did raise this again with him, but the principal thing around him as it was as planning minister was around the Tintinara airfield zoning issue.
Yes.
I'm in information document, councillors. Councillor Taylor.
Through you, Matt, to the CEO, congratulations on receiving further funding for the Murray Coorong Trail. What will this particular section look like?
So the funding is for actually master planning of the design. I'm reading the right page. What page are you on, councillor? Sorry, I can answer. The only new money that has come from the Murray Coorong Trail at the moment is for detailed design work. The Murray Coorong Trail has was a concept, but it was never ever master planned for any of the stages. So this council has done one stage fully, and there was another one that's already been planned and partly done, and that's to do with rate revenue. But the funding, the grant funding, is around working with Mid Murray and the Murray Bridge Council around master planning all of the, so that we can then chop it off in stages and get grant money per stage. Up until now, we didn't have that piece of work done.
Well, this says 184,000
Yes.
for master planning.
In fact, there's two, in fact, the master planning from memory, and I'm guessing here, was more than that. So it's 400 kilometres of trail, basically. And so there's two parts to it. One was the master planning, and I have to admit, I don't remember what the second part was, but it's definitely master planning.
That's scary, isn't it? 184, well, more than 184,000.
And in fact, through you, Mayor, we had trouble finding a consultant who would do it.
Councillor Roundtree, we're nearly there.
Yeah, just real quick one. July 20 CEO meetings on July 20. What is, and can you tell us more about the Meningie Wetland Centre? Is it a building?
No.
Is it?
So that is some preliminary work. The Meningie School is doing some work around their extension and the moving of the library, so that adults don't have to walk through the school precinct to get to the library, and council has an interest in that. What we're also doing at the same time is looking at upgrading the stormwater drain and the swamp, which is called swamp number what? 33 next to it. So we had a chat with the consultants who are working with the school to make sure that if there was an opportunity for us to design something that looked a little better in terms of our stormwater thing, that we could utilize that swamp in a particular way. So it's just early days of making sure that, again, master planning, that we do the swamp work, but we just don't do the swamp work and ignore any opportunity to have a master plan ready there for some other work that might be done with the school. So it's an integrated process. There is nothing more than making sure that we don't try and bolt something onto the school that doesn't
Thank you.
is sympathy with the school building.
Anything else, councillors? I move on. Item 16, confidential item. So for those watching the live stream, please be advised the meeting is about to move to confidence. Live stream will stop. For those who wish to view the end of the meeting, the video will be available on YouTube after today's meeting.